Hi and welcome to another episode of Pennsylvania Voter Information Network. I am your host, Larry DeMarco, and today we are here with Cathy Spahr, candidate for the Pennsylvania State House 160th Legislative District. She is running to unseat Stephen Berrar. Cathy is a resident of Upper Chichester and stepped forward to help take back our democracy immediately after the recent presidential election. Horrified by the current administration's effort to reverse protective environmental legislation, she sent the Lorax to Washington. Her idea was to distribute the book to each member of Congress as a reminder of the importance to protect the environment. Based upon its success, she did the same thing in Pennsylvania State House in Harrisburg, which caught the recognition of Governor Wolf. Cathy spent some time in the Harrisburg area where she worked as an environmental consultant in the engineering industry. Her expertise includes environmental compliance and natural resource preservation for property transactions and telecommunications facilities. She is now the Codes, Planning, and Zoning Administrative Coordinator and Assistant Zoning Officer for Newtown Township, Delaware County, where she has been awarded for her historic preservation efforts by the Historic Commission of Delaware County and the Board of Supervisors of Newtown Township. Cathy, thank you for being a guest of Delaware County Political News.
Thanks, Larry.
Cathy, when we first met, you handed me a business card saying, "I speak for the trees." Tell me how you got that idea.
Well, I would spend my time driving my kids to school, not talking because I was very upset over Trump and Toomey and what was going to happen to our environment. So I was mulling things over in my head, and I was thinking about, oh, I can fax, and I can write letters, and I can make phone calls, and I can use like ResistBot and all of these tools that we have. What can I do to make my letter, my effort stand out more than anybody else's? Because you know Toomey's just going to have a huge stack, right? Because nobody likes him. And I thought, the Lorax. That's a really nice, colorful, bright book, nice size to it and everything. And I thought, yep, he needs a copy. Nope, let me rethink that. So's Bob Casey. Nope, let me rethink that. They all do. And it's not that Bob Casey needed one because he needs to learn a lesson. He needed one for a filibuster, right? Down on the House floor, him and Bernie Sanders filibustering it out, reading the Lorax over and over again. How cool would that be, right? And so that's how the idea was born. A GoFundMe page later, I raised enough money to obtain over 535 copies of the book.
Tell us, who is the Lorax and what's his story?
So the Lorax is the protector of the trees. And there's this guy named the Onceler who comes along, and he comes to this beautiful park. And the park has all these really cool looking trees called truffula trees in them. And they kind of have these really cool, flowing, soft, pillow-like tufts to him. And he starts picking the tufts and realizes that he can make this funny thing called a thneed. And anybody can do whatever they want with the thneed. They can turn it into whatever they want it to be. So production starts demanding him to cut these trees down. And the first time he cuts down a tree, the Lorax shows up and says, "What are you doing cutting down my trees?" And the Onceler said, "Oh, it's not a big deal." And he said, "But, you know, people live with these trees. They eat the truffula tree fruits. They want the shade. They want the habitat. They want this stuff." And the Onceler just didn't care. And finally, everything was gone. He cut all the trees down. The barbaloots who ate the truffula tree fruit had to move away. The swarmy swarms who fly in the air couldn't breathe anymore. They had to move away. The fish in the pond couldn't eat out of the pond anymore because the water was disgusting, and they had to move away. And the Lorax took each one of these creatures away. And the Onceler cut down the last tree, and he looked around and he realized, what have I done? His family packed up and left him. There was no more thneeds to make, and all that was left was this sad, disgusting land. And it suddenly occurred to him that the Lorax had left him a message, and the message just said, "unless." It was a rock that said "unless" on it. And he realized that unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. And it finally occurred to him what it meant. And he had one seed left of a truffula tree, and he gave it to the narrator of the story, so the narrator of the story could go out and plant that tree and help it to grow and make sure it had sunlight and make sure it had water and make sure it was protected so it could come back. And if we don't try, then we're going to be left with nothing.
So you bought a whole stack of these books, you sent them to DC. What was the response?
Well, so we did more than just send them. Packed up my kids. My friends joined in on this with me. They packed up their kids. Some lady I'd never met before in my life jumped in on this and was the one to create the Facebook page, set up the hotel rooms. We met her the very day before our first delivery, and we all converged on DC, and we delivered these books in person. And the response was, it was awesome. It was very, very cool.
So tell me a story about who responded and what was the specific response you got?
So the staffers loved it. They thought it was great. And the kids, I mean, they're way cuter than we are, because ultimately what we did is we had the kids speak to the staffers so they could learn how to speak to adults, learn how to raise their voices, and ask for something and lobby their congressman. And the staffers loved it. They thought the kids were adorable. But our final stop of the day was, for our first trip, was in Bob Casey's office. And we stopped there and we said, look, we're stopping here for our last stop because we know we're going to have a good reception. We know Bob supports the environment. And this is what we've been doing all day. And we thought we'd just end it with you. And they said, well, let's see if we can end it on a higher note. So I thought, well, I don't know what that means. The staffer disappears, she comes back, and she said, come on into his office. So all of us actually went into his working office. We all got to take a turn sitting at his desk, pretending to be a senator, and it was so fun. We got a picture in front of the fireplace. His chief of staff came out and told us about who sits where in the room when he has visitors, and then ultimately, his office used to be JFK's office.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we were just like, oh my God, we're in JFK's office.
Wow.
And he has a corner of his office that's dedicated to pictures of JFK. It was very, very cool. So that night we went home, we tweeted at him, and he tweeted back at us and thanked us. We also tweeted at Jack Reed, and who's from Rhode Island, and he tweeted back and thanked us for the book. So we did get some recognition. We've gotten letters from people thanking us. I got a phone call from Tom Schwazi, who's a representative from New York. We chatted on the phone for a while, and he loved the book. He was thrilled. Representative Raskin, who is from Frederick, Maryland, actually did a book exchange with one of the kids. He wrote a book on the Constitution for children. So then we came back another time, and it turns out he told other representatives that we were coming. So when a group of us showed up at it was a representative from Washington, the state of Washington, and we showed up in her office and she said, oh, we've been waiting for you to come. So they were expecting us, which was really, really cool.
So it turned out to be a very effective symbolic gesture.
It's a very symbolic, effective gesture, enough that Senator Mitch McConnell actually snail-mailed his book back with a letter citing ethics, that he couldn't accept the book because of ethics. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I understand that the response was effective enough that you moved on to Harrisburg. Discuss that.
So I actually met Leanne Kruger-Brannicky at an Indivisible type of event, and I told her what I was doing, and she said, hey, do you want to come do a press release with me in Harrisburg for HR 421, which is a resolution urging Governor Wolf to have Pennsylvania join the U.S. Climate Alliance. And I said, sure. I said, well, and while we're at it, we should start sending the books to Harrisburg too. And so that's what we did. We have not finished with that. We haven't finished with DC either. We've delivered about 300 books to DC, and I think about 50 or 75 to Harrisburg. We've only been to Harrisburg twice. So it's a very slow work in progress, but it's a lot of fun.
Your work's not done.
It is not done.
And you're enjoying it.
I am enjoying it. We have a great time every time we go. Our last trip, we delivered 100 books. It was pretty impressive. We had, each time, more people join in. It's great. More moms, more kids. It's awesome.
Why was this gesture important for you to take? Why should citizens act?
So I just felt like I needed to do more. Writing letters just wasn't enough for me. But it was also an opportunity for me to teach my kids about how to engage in democracy and how to raise their voices. Ultimately, the Lorax is a story that's more than just about the environment. It's about raising your voices for people who don't have tongues, right? Because that's what it says in the book. I speak for the trees have no tongues. That's what the Lorax says. And so my thought is if they know how to do this at the age of 9, when they're 19 and there's some other issue out there, Lord knows what that'll be. Hopefully it won't be the environment. If they're passionate about it, they'll already have the tools to know what to do. And I think that we also need to have clever, new gimmicky ideas where we're thinking outside the box and we're trying something new, because it keeps our resistance fresh. You know, just writing letters is the same old, and I don't know. I think politicians get jaded.
So how did your kids respond?
So my kids love it, actually. And I know how to crochet, so I actually went and made these hats that are in the spirit of the pink pussy hat, but they're blue and they have truffula trees on them with pom-poms. And everybody wears these hats, and they love wearing the hats. And if you go look at our website or our Facebook page and look at pictures from our visits, you can see that these are pretty happy kids. They're having a good time, they're all smiles, and they're really proud of what they're doing. The very first time we went, the kids were very nervous. They were like, I don't know if I want to speak. But by the end of the day, these kids were fighting over who was going to speak to the staffer. And to me, that's priceless.
How old are your children?
I have twin boys, they're 9.
9-year-old boys were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Fun.
Yep, they started when they were 8, they're 9 now, so yep.
Tell us about your work as an environmental consultant. You give away books of the Lorax.
Right. We give away books of the Lorax, and then we go out and we do an environmental assessment of a property, which really is about the history of the property and whether there's ever been environmental contamination on it. And if there has been, then other steps are followed. But I've also done some really cool things where I've done some biological assessments with streams and some stream restoration projects.
So why is this work important?
So it's important. There are 2 components to it, first off. One component is to look at environmental contamination and discover whether the proposed site has contaminants on it. Whoever ends up buying the property, if we don't do this study, would be responsible for the cleanup of those contaminants. So it's good to know what you're buying. The other aspect of it is historic preservation.
Tell us about the award that you received from the Historic Preservation Society.
I won an award for historic preservation through the Delaware County Planning Department and their annual historic heritage preservation program that they do. And I was given the award by the Delaware County Council. For my master's program at Westchester University, I created an interactive map of the historical resources for Newtown Township, Newtown Square. There are about 117 historical resources in the township, and I mapped them all out. And when you click on the map, you can find out more about each of the sites. Sometimes there's pictures, sometimes there's the historic resource survey card from the survey that was done in 1983, but they really liked it. Additionally, I added another layer to it where I have the sites that were extant in 1892, and I digitized a map from 1892, identified all the landowners at that time, digitized the roads and everything, and you can swipe back and forth on this map and see how it changes between today and 1892.
Nice. What other issues do you feel passionately about?
So the other issues that I have on my campaign platform are women's rights and raising our voices up. I want to make sure that we have body autonomy in the doctor's office, and that when we go there, we're able to plan our family the way we want to have our family, with our doctor, with our families. I also want to make sure that we learn how to stand up for ourselves and be strong leaders and raise our voices. And I want to make sure that when we go to work, we get paid the same amount as our male counterparts. After all, we are half of the population. It is a human rights issue that we all are treated equally. And just because we're women doesn't mean that we're less than. We're just as awesome as men are.
Agreed.
The other issue that I'm passionate about is the opioid crisis. I am a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober for almost 23 years.
Congratulations.
By the grace of God, hopefully April 18th, I'll have 23 years sober. And, you know, we have people dying. People are dying. Family members are dying. Brothers, sisters, loved ones, friends, aunts, uncles, mothers, children. And it's not being addressed properly in Harrisburg. We have congressmen and representatives and senators who just, they don't understand addiction. And Stephen Barrar just wants to lock him up and throw away the key, or he wants to make insurance companies pay for that. And neither of those are the answer, nor are they reasonable options. If we actually address the problem, maybe we'll actually come to some better solutions where we can truly help people get back up on their feet. You know, addiction is insidious. It's powerful. It's baffling. And it's hard for people to understand why, when your life is so horrible, you wouldn't want to change it. They don't understand that. But addiction is a disease of fear. And when you're an active alcoholic or an active drug addict, you know what you're going to get with that next high. But you don't know what you're going to get when you wake up sober. You don't know how that's going to turn out, and all of this destruction is around you.
There's a big psychological element to it.
Yeah, there's it's a, you know, they talk about it being spiritual, emotional, psychological, physical. There are a lot of different aspects to it. And when we ask people to get sober, we're asking them to take a leap of faith. And if they don't have any faith, how are they going to do that?
Why do you want to run for office?
For me, it's kind of the next step in my advocacy. I felt like, okay, I'm doing the Lorax, and the Lorax is awesome, and the Lorax is great, and I love the Lorax, but I still feel like I need to do more. Like, something needs to change, and something has to give. And right now, Trump's administration is throwing everything back to the states, especially as far as the environment goes. And right now, Pennsylvania's environment is under attack, horribly under attack by the Republicans, even though we have an environmental right, an environmental constitutional right to clean water, clean air, protection of our natural resources. They're still just battering ram on our environmental resources. And it's fine if Trump wants to throw things back to the states, but if that's the case, we need to have a strong state stance that makes sure that we protect our environmental resources, that we protect our residents, and that's not happening, you know. And so I want to get in there because I want to make sure that we are going to protect our future. Leave something for our children. Make sure that they have health care. Make sure that their bellies are full, that they have a good education, that they have clean air to breathe. And if we maintain the status quo as we are now, I don't know how much longer Pennsylvania can withstand this battering ram of the GOP.
Why should voters vote for you?
So I have been working for Newtown Township for almost 4 years. I have 13,000 bosses now, where I provide constituent services for them. I help develop ordinances and codes. Within my job, I talk to them all the time. I help them. I'm used to this. This is, what's another 45,000 residents? Truly, it's no big deal. I've been doing this and I'm used to it. I already know how to do government.
Cathy, we'll leave it there, and I want to thank you for being a guest on Pennsylvania Voter Information Network.
Thanks, Larry.
We have been here with Cathy Spahr, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. If you like this video, share it with everyone on your contact list and Facebook friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.